I do want to share with you that God is really good to missionary kids. And I think many of you might be thinking that's one of your biggest fears. That was my biggest fear before going out. I mean, I said Jackie and I can both die, but if something happened to our kids, I don't know how I would wrestle with the Lord with that. But thank goodness, my wife, she's Korean American from Queens, New York. Any Korean Americans from Queens, New York here? I'll tell you, I know that there's one of them, but they're not afraid of anything. So, anyways, that's another story. Maybe if I have some time, I'll tell you. But on the same time, I've been involved with the Lausanne movement. And the Lausanne movement, again, is just bringing leaders together, connecting leaders together for global missions. We had a World Congress, actually, Doug Birdsall, I'm sitting right in his chair right now, but he actually organized the Third World Congress, which brought 4,000 to 5,000 Christian leaders together in Cape Town. And the reason why I wanted to bring this up was, I think the highlight of that conference, the highlight of that World Congress, was this 17-year-old high school kid. When she went up to speak, it was like a pin dropped in the room because she's from North Korea. And it was just, she was in tears as she shared how her father was most likely executed. Her parents both gone, and here she's alone. But yet, because of her parents' testimony, her father went back to spread the gospel in North Korea and was martyred. She wants to go back to North Korea one day as a missionary, back to her own people. And it was just a powerful testimony. And again, I wanted to bring her up just to show you that it's this younger generation that we need to reach. I mentioned Joshua Wong, but this younger generation of 17-year-old folks who have this idealism, this, in some sense, a romanticized view of life, but yet God is gripping this generation in a special way. Really, you look at that kid, I bet you if he were walking in the hallways of North America, he would just be kind of like, anyways, it's, yeah, you know what I mean? You look at him and say, well, he doesn't look too impressive. And yet, when I was in Hong Kong, I'm going to show you some pictures. So this is in Mongkok. I came to Mongkok because the night before, this is where they had some scuffles between the protesters and the pro-Beijingers. In fact, what the government did was, instead of using the police to attack, several nights ago, the police used tear gas, and what happened with the tear gas and the canisters was it got the whole city upset. And before it used to be these students are just kind of like on the marginalized, they're kind of like they're just spoiled kids. But after the tear gas, after the government came in with tear gases, I tell you, it seemed like the whole Hong Kongers, the old folks and parents, and all came together to support their children. So the government kind of realized that they can't use those kind of measures against the students. So I don't think the Hong Kong government did it. I think the Chinese government did this. They hired these triad gangsters. A couple hundred of them came and started beating up these students. And it took place the night before I arrived into Mongkok. So you could sense tension in the air. But these kids are fearless. They sit and this is, I think, close to around 10 p.m. They were there to wee late at night. I sat and listened to them. Of course, they're speaking Cantonese and didn't understand most of what they were saying. So I sat down next to two students. I just started asking questions. Robin and Wei, university students, young kids. their parents are not really are against this. It's a generational issue. And you can just, you walk through the streets and you can almost, just by looking at the person, you kind of know if they're for or against. You can just sense if they're young and they're wearing black or yellow and they got a backpack that means they're going to be there for a while and they're determined. You just see in their eyes. And then you hear these pro-Beijingers once in a while, and older folk will start yelling at them, and then you would see them start yelling back, and it'd be like a confrontation. And then the police would come in and divide the two, and then take the pro-Beijingers away. These students are just fearless, just standing their ground. I went down to Admiralty the next day, and Admiralty is where they had 100,000 people that night, the night before. And there's so many, you could just sense it's a people's movement, full of all these homemade signs. This one says, 父母为我哭了, means my parents are crying for me, because the parents are against this, because they don't want their kids to, the parents want just a safe Hong Kong society. They don't want to change, they don't want to ruffle, they don't want to rock the boat. But the kids are thinking, I'm not thinking about now, I'm thinking about 20 years from now. I'm thinking about the generation in the future. We want to be able to vote for our leaders. They want civic change. They want true democracy in China. My parents cry for me, 我为将来哭了, but I'm crying for the future. And that's just, you see the idealism, the hope that it's in this younger generation. Then I'm at Admiralty again, there's a guy, you just look at him, he's covered his face, he looks like a gangster, and he starts to yell at the students. And it's these really student girls who are coming and yelling back at this gangster. I mean, in the normal circumstances, this gangster would just beat these students up, but the students are united together. They sense this momentum. They sense sort of a destiny. They sense that this is going to change the future of not just Hong Kong. They know it's more than Hong Kong. It's going to change and impact China. And they know if you change China, guess what happens? You change the world. They know what they're doing at this moment in history has a historic impact for mankind. So I went to McDonald's to get a iced coffee. And I just show you how diverse a global city is. So I'm sitting there drinking iced coffee just to show you it's a McDonald's. And right in front of me are 4 Muslim teenage girls. And you probably can't see it, but they all got their fingers painted, and they all got like these nice handbags, and they all got makeup on, but they all got their head covered. If you notice, it's the conservative and the liberal clash right there in McDonald's, right in front of our eyes. And just as like our young people, the evangelical Christians, young people are kind of losing it to the world, so are they. And I'm sure we would have almost hardly a chance to talk to their parents about the gospel, but I'm sure they're far easier to reach. Walked outside again, and sure enough, another scuffle took place. The scuffle now was between an older man and an older lady, and I'm telling you, the lady was trembling. The lady was actually a pro-democracy lady. You could tell she was either a parent or older generation who came alongside. She was wearing black, and she came alongside the students, and she was defending the students with her life, with her claws. She was about to defend against an older man. And you just saw of course, whenever there's any kind of conflict, all the reporters come in. Everyone's got they want to show, who's the one who's who's starting the fight. And if you can go to Facebook, you'll see lots of these. In fact, you'll see there's one Facebook where you have this gangster yelling at the students behind the barricades, and the students yelling back at him, and he's challenging, come on, I'll fight you, come on, I'll fight you. This is all in Cantonese, so I'm just kind of reading between their lips and figuring out that's what he's saying. He said, I'll fight you, I'll fight you. But then, the English title says, gangster admits to taking money from the Chinese government. So while he's saying, I'll fight you, and he's so angry against the protesters, he's probably made a slip, says, probably the Hong Kong students are saying, you're paid by the Chinese government. And he goes, yeah, so what? Maybe he said something like that. And then you hear the roar of the crowd. I told you this guy is paid by the and it's these students with glasses, these black glasses that look like nerds who are standing up to gangsters. It's something that you just have to be there to see. Then, this is plastered. This is just people writing notes of support of all walks of life. Those are just sticky pads. People writing, bless you, Hong Kong, we support you, blah, blah. And people are protesting right in front of this building. This is the central government in Admiralty. The central government has both the Hong Kong flag and the mainland China flag. And this is where the protesters were preventing the Hong Kong government from coming to work. The governor and all his civil servants, they were saying, we're going to block you from coming to work. I think on Monday, I heard they negotiated, and so they were able to allow, they're still negotiating, they were letting some of them to head to work. And right outside there, now this is Sunday morning when I came to Admiralty. Now Sunday morning, because I was leaving that afternoon, I wanted to come and just pray there. And so this was the Christian, I looked for the Christian presence, and I found the Christian presence right there. This is a place where Christians come and they pray for the students. Of course, all the Christians are at church right now, so they weren't there. So I spent an hour just praying for the students. And I bumped into one of my friends from Boston there too as well, Arnold. He happened to fly into Hong Kong that day just to see what's happening. He himself is from Hong Kong, but he's also from Lexington Church in Boston. So we're able to pray together for Hong Kong. Well, that's my story. I want to share with you how important this is, because this is where the two competing forces. You have a authoritative government that wants to control every aspect of China, that has integrated Hong Kong into its system, but they realize they need to have two systems to make it work, so they give some freedom to Hong Kong. However, the Hong Kong young people want complete freedom like they see in the West. They want to be able to elect their leaders. Now, the Chinese government is saying, we can let you elect their leaders, but we will choose the leaders that you can elect. So out of 3 or 4 choices, you all can choose. Everyone has one vote. And so they're saying that is universal suffrage. That is everyone gets one vote. And the Hong Kong folks are saying, no, we even want to choose the 3 or 4 candidates who want to be president. Because ever since China took over Hong Kong, they say one by one, every leader has gotten worse. They've just been tightening the screws. First, they come in with patriotic education that's more that's pro-Beijing, and then they start to limit some of the freedoms, and then they see the mainlanders coming in, hoarding in, and buying all these goods and raising up the real estate properties and raising up all these prices, and so they're really sort of angry with mainland China at this time. So you have these two competing forces, and China. Everyone agrees China's not going to back down. But it's so interesting. When I was there, I thought the students, at some point, when I was there, I just got a sense that they're not going to back down either. Yeah, they'll still negotiate, but they're gonna try to go for it all. And they're so passionate about it, they're willing to lay down their lives. I've talked to a few. So you have sort of a Tiananmen Square brewing. And the last Tiananmen Square, of course, ended up in tragedy. But if you talk to a lot of the government officials that we know, and Abraham and I know, most feel like that was a big lost opportunity for China to actually reform. So even within the government of the Chinese Party, there are many who feel like Tiananmen Square was a huge tragedy. But of course, they won't say it. And the masses and most people on the streets will say it was a good thing, because then it would have gotten too chaotic, and then it would have been like Russia, where the Soviet Union fell and the country just kind of fell to pieces. But if you talk to some of the high government officials who really can see between the lines, they see that was sort of a missed opportunity for China. And I believe they're saying, maybe these Hong Kong students can be our opportunity to one day change China around. I think most people eventually want that, but it's got to come at the right time. And they definitely can't do that in China, because if anyone protests like that in China, it's automatic prison or automatic crackdown. And somehow Hong Kong, being in front of the media with young people who are passionate and so on, it seems to be a place that somehow is worked out. So I see that maybe God's hand in history, God is using Hong Kong to one day open up China. So you can pray for Hong Kong, pray for the students, and pray for the Chinese government. They're not going to change now. They're not going to show that they're going to, for sure they're going to show that we're in charge. But after this event, however it turns out, they're going to go back to the drawing boards. And they'll say, maybe we were a little bit, maybe we tightened the screw too much. Maybe we need to think about how to open up in certain areas. So it's definitely going to change the thinking from the top. Now, before I go to the actual church, urban church in China, maybe I can open up for some questions and answers. And maybe some of you from Hong Kong or from Asia might have some different perspectives. So I'm willing to have some dialogue on that. But I sense this is a very monumental time in the history of China, and actually the history of the world. Because if China opens up, that opens up the opportunity for the gospel, and it actually opens up engagement between China and the West. Right now, the Chinese government, especially this president, sees the number one enemy it's not Japan. In some sense, it's not Vietnam or the Philippines or the neighboring countries that they're having conflict. You know who their biggest threat is? It's the United States of America. Because they see the West as dominating the world order, and they don't want to be included in it. They want to be the next world order. And they feel the only way forward is for China to be strong. So Hong Kong may be the thing that would be able to kind of break that mindset, because if China continues on down that road, we will see conflict. We will see maybe a possible war between China and Japan. But behind that is not even Japan. Behind that, it is the U.S. We may see a further tightening of the church inside of China, as we have been seeing the past year or two. So it does have a tremendous impact. But however it turns out, somehow God's in control, and I've always seen that whenever there's stronger persecution or pressure, the church always seems to grow. And whenever there's an opening or whenever there is more freedom, the church grows for a little bit, but then it starts to revel in its blessings, and then slowly gets too fat, and then slowly starts to dwindle. So it may not be God's timing in that anyways. Yes, Rick.
Share just a little bit, church in Hong Kong compared to the church in Beijing or the church in the parts of China that are in fact growing. What's the state of the church in Hong Kong?
Yeah, the church in Hong Kong, well, first of all, to tell you where Christians stand on this. Remember I said whenever there's pressure, there's always two sides. And so the church is actually divided right down the middle. There are those, the young people in the church support the protesters, and the parents are against it. So the church that she and I went to visit, they came out with a statement because the parents are so worried. Their kids are protesting in the streets, and they don't want their kids to get shot. And so so the church is in a dilemma. The church leaders, in fact, 3 of the leaders who actually started the Occupation Central, or 2 of them were professors and 1 was a pastor, and 2 of them are Christians. So the Christian, and then the Catholic former Cardinal Zen is fully, the Catholics in some sense are fully behind a lot of this protest movement. So the Christian movement has got a strong, overly strong presence, and yet there's also this, there are pastors up there that say, if any of you of my congregation goes to, you'll be kicked out of our church. Our church cannot go to protest. So they're divided right down the middle. Now, the strength of the Hong Kong church is that Hong Kong Christians have had a strong civic impact on society. If you take a look at every building block, usually there's a school or a church in the first floor in the community. And so a lot of the young people have been educated either in a Catholic school or a Protestant school or a Baptist school. So there's the educated are very Christianized in their values. And percent-wise, it's one of the highest percent of Christians in all of, even compared to China, Taiwan, even North America, about 15% supposedly of Hong Kongers are Christian, or claim to be Christian. But compared to mainland China Christianity, and this is, I'm going to be biased now as I'm going to be speaking on behalf of mainland China. Numbers only speak on one part. Because of the abundance of wealth in Hong Kong, I think the church is far weaker than the church in mainland China. The church in mainland China is, my sense, is going to be able to weather more the storm of persecution. That's just because of the environment, it's produced a certain kind of Christian faith. And so the church that will eventually send out missionaries is probably going to be mainland China more than Hong Kong. But I may be speaking a little bit too biased here. Yes, back there?
Yes, I wanted to ask a question, because a lot of this, when I look at this, almost seems to mirror what happened during the Civil Rights era, where a group of people felt there was an injustice and they couldn't take it anymore. But then there was another group who said, you're Christians, you can't do this. So what's your sense as to where the church goes forward from here? Because some of the dispatches I've heard is there's a lot of sense of economic injustice in Hong Kong. And how is the church dealing with that? And then how is the church dealing with its image vis-a-vis the government? Like, how does it deal with with sermons and other things? How does it kind of portray the government?
So like I said, I think it depends on each pastor. They're both different sides. But as I talk to, let me just tell you from my sense, what kind of Christians would side with which side. The blue-collar Christians, the ones, or the blue-collars, those who are working the streets, the vendors, the taxi drivers, they're actually pro-Beijing. They're saying, we just want to make a living. We don't need to change the order. It's not going to change any. Your protesting is actually hurting my business, my bottom line. I just need to live day by day, and I'm not thinking about 20 years from now. Then you have the educated college graduates and working professionals, younger working professionals who don't have kids yet, who have less to lose, willing to go all night and sleep out on the street because your kids are not at home. You don't have to feed them. You don't have to take care of them. You don't have to send them to school. You have to worry about them. So you have this younger, white-collar, middle-class Christian who are more wanting to change the injustices that they see. And then, of course, the parents of these kids. And the older you grow, the more you kind of say there's more to lose now. And so they would probably side more with the government. So I think the church is kind of almost divided, often depending on your income status, your education, your life, and so on. So how are the church leaders? They're debating among themselves how to present a unified presence. So most churches, often they say, let's just pray for peace. Whether you agree with the students or not, we all agree that praying for peace and a peaceful resolution is what we all agree. And the students would agree with that. They want peace, but they want peace on their terms. And the government wants peace too. They want peace on their terms. But the church is just praying that there'll be peace. I asked one of the key leaders, seminary presidents there, for his opinion. And he wouldn't even give me which side he's on, because he said it's so divided right now between both sides. Yes.
Hi, I was also wondering, can you share any about like Macau and what's going on there? And then also, I know they're politically separate, but is there any influence from Taiwan as well in all of this?
Yeah, I think Macau is watching, but there have been some protests there, but they're several steps behind Hong Kong. They don't have the same kind of strength. And Taiwan is watching very carefully because they're saying if this is what's happening in Hong Kong, we don't want any part of China. That's sort of their read. So China's got to think if they crack down too harshly, they potentially lose the hearts of the Taiwanese. So it's sort of one of those things that it's a very tricky thing on the one hand, they want to show that we embrace both Hong Kong, two systems, so that Taiwan will want to come in. But once you say we embrace it and they want freedom, it's really hard for them at this stage. Okay, I'm going to move along because I do want to share with you, Karen, can you just give me a time frame here right now? Because I know that I want to respect. Okay, 1:30. Okay, so let me just share with you, because I do want to share with you what missions looks like in urban China for our family. Now, so that you just get, I share with you 3 families today, but just to give you what it can look like, because many people may think, well, the church is strong in China already, so why do we need to send any more missionaries? Right? I mean, let's find areas where the church is not strong. And there's a lot of truth to that. In fact, I think in Beijing right now, I would probably, if I had a choice, maybe not send missionaries to Beijing as much because it's got a strong church now. But there's many other cities across China that do not have the same kind of strength. And a church that's growing, and missionaries are very good when the church is just at the beginning stage to grow, to partner together, to walk alongside together during this time. So just to show you, this is our family, in Beijing. The kids are wearing uniforms. They went to Chinese school. And I tell you, Chinese school is not easy. First grade, they came back home with homework, and I couldn't even read it, first grade. So it's 2 hours of homework every day starting first grade, first day. Oh, man. And I thought, our kids being, American more, the teacher would be a little more lenient. I was like, because she understands, we're not, we don't speak Chinese at home, right? kids come crying at home. Teacher called me stupid in front of class and hit me in the head. What do you do? So I went and talked to the teacher. My wife was very wise. She said, Dave, remember, they have a hard job. I said, can you just be a little more lenient? Because my kids, we speak English at home. 不行. And Chinese means, what does it mean in Chinese? No, yeah. You came to China, we do it the Chinese way. Yeah. And so the Chinese way is actually, they divide the kids up into groups, and if your group's test scores are low, the whole group suffers. Or if your group doesn't do, one person doesn't do the homework or all the homework, the whole group suffers. So when our kids can't finish the homework, which I'm the one spending 3-4 hours with the kids trying to figure out. Anyway, so it was traumatic for me. But one thing that I don't have any regrets now, because I've often remember Chinese Christians coming to me and thanking me for just sending our kids to Chinese school, because it really, there's this incarnational presence that we have when we do that, and so on. Anyways, but you all know that in China there's the official church called the Three Self Church. This is the government-sponsored church. This is Haidian Church. Actually, we worshipped there for a few months when we couldn't worship at Shouwang because it was too dangerous, and so we didn't want to go to the international church, and so we worshipped here for a little bit. But this church, the official church, has 20 million Christians and growing and very vibrant and very active. So I just want to say firsthand that God's doing something in the official church, and God bless them. But what I've seen, though, the momentum that's taking place is actually in the house church. 2 or 3 times the number of Christians are in this house church movement where they're not recognized. And so we arrived into Beijing 2003. This is after a year and a half in Kunming. I was fed up changing diapers every day. Of course, I did that in Beijing too as well. But in Kunming, I was like, I want to be in Beijing. We arrive in Beijing 2003. And something happens in 2003. SARS comes in. Now, we arrived January 2003. I start to meet with friends, and do you remember Zhu Zhenrong? He was a student here. He started to do student ministry in Beijing, and so I started to work with him, and he introduced me to this pastor, this church, and this pastor got to know her and the pastoral staff, and they said, "Hey, Dave, can we use your home to do a baptism?" I said, "Oh, sure. I've never had." Sure, yeah. I've done baptisms at a church, but not at home. And so what do? Well, they come to our shower. They fill up the bathtub with water, and they baptize them while people are praying in our living room. And these are the 13 new baptized folks that day. The church grows. When we arrived into Beijing 2003, they were meeting in the homes, very quietly, very carefully. However, now this gentleman here, Pastor Ben. He's a graduate from Tsinghua. I met him one day actually, I met him in Athens. We were both there at the Olympics there to see what the Chinese church can prepare for 2008, and we became friends. And he said, "Okay, when we come back, we'll plant a church in Wudao." We planted a church there, and within 4 months, he left for Fuller. Now, you think that's weird, but in China, 4 months is a long time. And so the new pastor came in and brought in a pastor intern who just came to Christ to do the PowerPoint and to cook the lunch after service. And he also brought in another lady, her name was Rainbow, to play the piano. And this pastoral intern had just come to Christ, just about within 6 months to a year, and he just came and did the PowerPoints. And let me just show you right here. There he is. So the guy doing the PowerPoint, I don't know if you recognize him. Back there. That's our Gordon-Conwell graduate, Jet Li. When he first started our church, all he did was PPT and cook the food. And you know what this class was? This was our first online Semlink. I was introducing Chinese Semlink to China for the first time. Within a year, Jet was preaching on the pulpit. So that's how you learn. You just get pushed into to positions very soon. Well, sorry, let me get to the page here. We planted a church. Now, this is why I want to share with you about a couple things. First is incarnational ministry is more important than actually what you do. It's not how gifted you are as a Bible study leader, how well you do, how well you know your Greek and your discourse analysis, and how well you preach. No, it really is living life day in, day out, and sticking it through. And so when we planted the church, primarily what we did was our team helped take care of the Sunday school and train Sunday school teachers. In fact, out of the Sunday school kids, 3 of them were ours. It was just a living life with each other. See, when SARS hit, we had just arrived, and I was, the pastor, we just did the baptism, and I was thinking, well, there's not much for us to do, so this is probably a good time to come back to the U.S. for a home assignment, right? I mean, I think most of you would probably understand. You just arrive into your field, and you hear of this disease, and now, have you seen The Walking Dead? Anyways, my son's watching it somehow, and I just happened to see one episode of it last night, but not 2 nights ago. But because it's like The Walking Dead feeling that it's the end of the world during SARS. That if you caught this disease, kind of like Ebola, you're going to die. So I called up my pastor friend. I said, we're thinking about going back to the U.S. What do you think? Oh, yeah, sure, no problem. So I told my wife, I said, I'm the husband, the father of the family, the home. If the kids die and you die, I'm responsible. So we're packing up. We're going back home for a home assignment. Called my supervisor. He said, sure, that's a good idea. Called our medical advisor. Yeah, you guys aren't doing anything anyways. Sure. Okay. However, I was married to a Korean American from Queens, New York. And she's just got a different kind of mentality. It's kind of like the harder it is, it's the will of God. So she said, Dave, now I just want to let you know, theologically, I'm complementarian, but she's egalitarian. So, but we've had our battles. We were here. We both got our M.Divs. here at Gordon-Conwell, so we got both positions. We argued it out theologically. We're on two opposite sides. But practically, I'm an egalitarian and she's a complementarian. And it's only, I tell you guys, I'm only a complementarian when I'm afraid. So I made a decision. I said, Jackie, we're going. She just said, Dave, you just want to pray about it. Maybe God's asking us to stay. Just knew God was working in my heart. And I called my pastor friend the next day. I said, we're just thinking about staying. What do you think? Her response was, you'd be willing to stay? And I just could hear from the tone of voice that it didn't matter what we did. We couldn't do anything. SARS, everything closed. In fact, all the restaurants closed. The only restaurant that was left open, thank God, was McDonald's. All the rice was sold out. All the eggs were gone in the supermarket. I'm telling you, it was like the end of the world. But that tone of voice was a confirmation from the Lord. And because we stayed, we were able to plant that church. And you know what I've noticed is whenever there's a calamity or whenever there's a national tragedy, somehow hearts are softened. And it's those times when you leave, it's the worst time to leave. And so that's what we learned. But I'm just going to share with you some of the kinds of people. When you come to the Urban Center, this is the company that we have a language school, which we train. But anyways, we're able to have leadership training programs for students down the road at Tsinghua University. Tsinghua University is it's the Tsinghua and Peking University are it's like Harvard and MIT combined. So Liu Guan, Abraham back there is a graduate of Peking University. Jet Li is a graduate of Tsinghua. And to get into Tsinghua, you have to beat out 9 million other applicants. I mean, when you walk through those campuses, you just feel like you're in brain power. So imagine Jet. He's getting these academic awards. He's come here and did it all in English, right? Imagine an American who has never left America going to China and learning in a Chinese seminary and beating out the Chinese in this course. Just imagine that kind of a perspective. Well, I decided when I arrived, I opened the newspaper, SARS hit, and I said, what can I do? And it happened to be Peking University had an international MBA program, and I said, well, maybe I should try. International MBA meant it's in English. Well, I applied for it, but I had to get 600 out of 800 in the GMATs. This is the English GMATs, okay? It's like SAT, 400 verbal, 400 math, right? Getting 600 for the Chinese is a piece of cake because SARS hit, and so they brought these people to come teach the Chinese how to pass. He pretty much said this: for math, you get 400 points, perfect score. If you're Chinese and you don't get perfect score, you have to apologize to your ancestors. That is what he verbally said. So now we got to work on getting 50% verbal. That's their strategy to get to 600. Well, I know I look like I'm smart on the outside, but I'm really dumb American in the inside. So I couldn't pass the GMAT test. But thank goodness to SARS, they let me take it again. And graciously, I was able to pass the second time. But I tell you, the brain power here's my classmates, 40 of them, none of them were Christians. But after I graduate, one by one, I just got a phone call first from Jean. Oh, she says, I want to meet with you. I know that you're a Christian. And so I led her to Christ at that very McDonald's. I tell you, McDonald's, You got to thank God for McDonald's in China, because McDonald's has saved a lot of people into the kingdom. We've done a lot of ministry there. Those are the 8 out of 40 came to Christ. And there's just a moment in this younger generation. They work for, from Samsung to GE to Microsoft. These are the future business leaders of China, the MBA folks. So the guy who's holding me in the back, his name is Jack. He's an entrepreneur. And I hadn't seen him for 4 years because I've been out here I haven't been able to go back. Well, guess what? Last week, right before I went to Korea, I was preaching at an OMF conference in San Francisco. And he happened to be in San Francisco, and he came by to hear me preach. But that guy is in the green right now, Jack. And he is on fire for God. He said, Dave, we got to get the other 32 to come to Christ. How do we do? And we have this WeChat. It's kind of like we communicate with each other. And my 8 Christian friends on the 40, almost every other text is something about God. I can tell my non-Christian friends are just sick and tired of them. They're just like, all these Christians. But you just sense there, just the momentum, the excitement of this. When they come to Christ, they think that they discovered gold, and they just want to share it. Abraham and I have also been involved with, these are returnees. Returnees are mainly Chinese who studied in the U.S., got PhDs, and now are back as professors or even lawyers or doctors or working professionals in China. And so they have a returnee fellowship, from all these different top universities. There's about, everyone there I think is a PhD except for myself and that little kid, or the kids. I don't even think, I tell you, brain power galore. These guys, and so Abraham, they started to attend Shawang Church, and Abraham was in charge of these returnees, and so he would gather them together. And it's interesting, the returnees sometimes don't get along with the local Christians, because the local Christians are thinking, well, what made you king by going overseas and getting a PhD and coming back and telling us what to do? And the returnees are, they feel like, well, we've got something to offer China, right? And so Abraham had to play that middleman role between the church leadership and those who are saying, returnees, you just humble yourself and be a regular person. And the returnees are saying, we're coming here to change China, change the world. So there's this, but just to see that this, when I left, I heard there was about 100 returnees in Shawang Church, and growing. Now, I do have to say that in these global cities, there's also the working class. In fact, there's more working class, blue-collar workers. And the first floor, where we lived on the second floor, was a foot massage parlor, which they come in. These working class folks massage people's feet 14 hours a day. It's really sad. From noon, or sometimes 1 or 2, when customers come in, they're there all the way till 2 or 3 at night. And 7 days a week. They get half a day off every 2 weeks. It's just brutal. So my wife Jackie just has more of she doesn't like the white collar as much. She likes the blue collar. She wants to hang out with the blue collar. So she bakes a lot of cakes for them. And so the manager in the red and his family, they came and stayed at our home during Spring Festival. But there is so much opportunity just to minister right in the city for blue-collar workers. And then here's our Beijing team that we started in Beijing, from 6 different countries, from Canada, from the UK, from the US, from Hong Kong, Korea, with kids coming together to reach Beijing. Now, when I left, John Hosklaw is now the team leader. I hear there's about 30 to 40 adults in the team now, and it's doubled since I left, reaching Beijing. Finally, I'm going to talk about is the church. When you are in the urban centers, you're reaching a leadership of different caliber. So these are urban church leaders Pastor Tianming here, the short person in the, that's actually Abraham, senior pastor of Beijing Showang Church. He's been under house arrest for 3.5 years. In fact, he has 3 security guards right outside his door, and they rotate every 8 hours so that he knows 24, and he's good friends with them. They play ping pong together, and my wife went to visit him on her last trip, and she kind of snuck into the home because they were playing ping pong. But Showang Church, whenever they get arrested and get put into prison, they're able to share the gospel with the prisoners, with the police officers, and you can. I mean, I don't need to share this. That's Abraham's story to share. But you ask them, they got tons of opportunities to share. In fact, I just got a WeChat from one of the ladies who just came out of 10-day prison. She led 3 people to Christ the first few days. She said, I wasn't even trying, you know. Ezra Jin, actually, the reason why I'm speaking now is because last week, Ezra Jin was supposed to bring a team of Chinese leaders to come and share about China, but 4 of their visas got denied, thanks to the U.S. government, not the Chinese government. So they're going to come in March, so we'll have an opportunity to engage with them there. But just to give you, these are key urban leaders. Tianming is a graduate from Tsinghua University, and Ezra Jin is a graduate from Peking University. These leaders are leading the urban church in China. And then finally, I'm just going to share is that in July, this past summer, we got 25 of the top leaders together to plan out the strategy. They have a vision to send out 20,000 missionaries by the year 2030. And so this was, after Cape Town, they weren't able to attend. They met last year in Seoul and then had this vision of 20,000 missionaries. And so this was the planning meeting how to carry out that vision of 20,000 missionaries. The urban church in China is actually, I believe, leading the other churches. Although, Wenzhou is very strong, Henan is very strong, Anhui is very strong, Shanghai is very strong. They have all their regional distinctives. There's something about Beijing that can bring them all together at the same table to say, how can the church in China together walk this road? So the urban church in China has such an incredible impact. Pray for China. This is the future. The reason why I show you that lady that came to Christ, that's actually a Ferrari she's sitting in. A restaurant has a Ferrari outside their restaurant. If you spend more than 100 kwai at their restaurant, they let you sit in a Ferrari ride. They got so much money. I'm telling you, the rich folks. And so the Chinese church leaders have told me, Pastor Tianming has told me, he said, we're not afraid of the Chinese government. That's not our greatest fear. In fact, the more persecution in some sense is better for us. But he says, what we're afraid of is the day when there's going to be no persecution and then we're just like you guys. And then our young people are going to have to choose between the Ferrari and coming to church. And he said, that is our greatest challenge ahead of us. Pray for us. This globalization, this urbanization is good for us, but it's also going to be our greatest challenge ahead. So pray for the church in China.